I have a 3.73 GPA. I got a 1270 on the SAT. I have worked a couple of jobs. I've applied for a couple of internships. I spent a year studying platelet-derived growth factors and how they could be applied to stem cells. See, this is what I look like on paper. This is what I put on my resume. But I want to tell you my story. So, when I was about 3, I watched this movie called The Ring. If you've ever heard of it, it's probably like PG-13, pretty scary, but to a 3-year-old, it's like the zombie apocalypse times 10 in 3D. It's the most terrifying thing. It gave me incredibly detailed and vivid nightmares to the point in which it seriously contributed to my chronic insomnia. I remember being terrified to go to sleep, being terrified to move from my bed after it got dark, being terrified to walk upstairs and cry to my parents. And all of these things, I feel like they really built on who I was as a person. And though I was extremely afraid of the dark and of toilets, because wells, toilets, they're like the same thing, it had the opposite effect on me in reality. For though I was scared at night, I wasn't afraid of anything when daylight came. I wasn't afraid of heights or spiders, boa constrictors. None of it scared me. I would ride my bike as fast as I could, and I would crash it, and then I would get back on the bike and keep riding. This was who I was. I made friends with anyone because I didn't care about the status quo. I enjoyed my life how I wanted to. And when anything bad happened, I would always think to myself, it's okay because it's light outside. There are no monsters, only stay in the night. And this was kind of my inner unspoken mantra through first grade when I was bullied every few days, and the aide watched. And I never saw it as a problem because it never truly frightened me. By the end of 6th grade recess, when all the 6th graders went away and 1st graders were left on their own and the 2nd graders came in because of the way they shifted the lunches, I had completely forgot about the incident. In 2nd grade, my friend, who was seriously abused and neglected, tried to kill herself in front of me. And remember, we're 8-year-olds. And the only thing I said after she had come to after passing out was, "It's going to be okay. Let's go and play now." And inside, because monsters only come out at night. And then when 3rd grade rolled around, and I am convinced that this girl who spoke to me every day was assaulted by, I believe, her mother's boyfriend, and another girl who was neglected and verbally abused by her father. They would talk to me about the troubles they were having and how depressed they were. And we were 3rd graders who were obsessed with Twilight and Harry Potter all at the same time. And here they were talking about how terrible life was, and all I could say is, it's going to be okay because monsters only come out at night. 4th grade rolled around, and things got significantly better. I stopped having my nightmares, and I changed to an accelerated learning program, or made some very stable friends. Our worries became nothing more than when the next Percy Jackson book would come out, when the next Harry Potter movie would come out, because that was just how life was. I finally kind of got that childhood that I needed. But as 6th grade rolled around, and I dropped out of my accelerated learning program to get away from a teacher whose name was Cronus, the Titan Lord. I only ended up with her to begin with because of budget cuts in the school. And things took a much darker turn. I was too energetic. I asked too many questions. I knew too much. I was nothing but a bother and it was just me, so I must have been the person who was wrong. And midway through that year, I almost drowned, and it really had a very hard impact on my psyche, because they always talked about flashing lights and seeing your life flash before your eyes, and all I saw was darkness. And I became afraid that that was what was waiting for me. And then, after a terrible and violent fight between me, my brother, and my friend from when we were 3, had such a bad fallout that my mom literally told me I could never hang out with my friend again, because it was my fault that my brother was acting out, because it was my fault that our friendships were falling apart. I slowly felt isolated. I became depressed. My friends from the accelerated program started talking to me like I was stupid because I had dropped out, because I wanted to avoid a teacher that I ended up getting anyway, who didn't like me half of the time, who sent me to the principal's office every other day because I didn't get my planner signed, because my mom didn't see the point of signing a planner, and neither did I. And I wouldn't do my homework, and my grades tanked, which is weird because you're in elementary school, and it shouldn't matter, but it mattered a lot to me. And by the time 7th grade rolled around and I went to middle school, I had fallen deeply into depression. I began self-harming. I stopped talking to people. I became very eccentric and very into myself, thinking of elitism and trying to believe that I was better than other people because I felt worse than everyone else. My fears and my monsters from the night had crept into my daily life, and it was me. And now I feared who I was, feared that I was the one wrong in every situation, that I was the one who was unfixable, who was a waste of potential, who was better off not in this world. And it took 3 suicide attempts and a change of schools to change that. American Preparatory Academy probably saved my life, because for the first time, I wasn't frowned upon for being eccentric about my learning, for loving what I loved. They encouraged me to write and told me I was good at it, rather than telling me I was a plagiarist who wouldn't write about the subject correctly. They told me I was not a waste of potential, but I was a well of potential. And I could be anything I wanted to be. And by 8th grade, I thought I was unstoppable. I had curbed my demons, because for the first time, I felt like my future was worth it, that I could do anything. I started researching platelet-derived growth factors. I took a math class that included calculus in 8th grade. I began writing a story that I hope can be expanded into an entire universe of books, with a plot so complicated that I think is beautiful. And I made friends who would stick by me and who were able to connect with me, and who never for a moment thought that I was any less than they were, that I was any less capable than they were. And 8th grade was good, but it became stressful toward the end. And I felt my demons nagging at me, waiting for me to trip and fall, so they could ensure that I never get up again. My monsters were still in my closet, even though I couldn't see them. And I couldn't say that monsters only come out at night. And so I went to a therapist who prescribed me some medication, and I reacted very poorly. But before anything went downhill, I remember for what for a long time I called the last good day. When I was together with all my friends, and all we talked about was Harry Potter and Brandon Sanderson and the movies that we loved, and we partied, and it was field day, and it was good. And that Sunday night, I tried to kill myself, and I almost succeeded. And they sent me to the hospital because I was a nutcase. And eventually they sent me home because I was a spoiled, attention-seeking teenager who didn't know how to deal with my life, who was trying to escape from my problems, whose parents were stressing me out too much. But that's not the way it was. And I still ended up home and suicidal as ever. And I realized 3 days later that after being released, that maybe I didn't want to die per se. Maybe I just wanted change. Maybe I wanted my demons to go away, or at least fight new demons. Ones that maybe I could understand better. And so I ran away. It was only for 24 hours. Nothing should have happened. But things did. I could count on 4 different sexual assault cases between 7 different people. That is what I experienced that day. And for weeks, I couldn't remember a single moment of it. I just remembered walking, thinking nothing could ever happen to me. I lived in Utah, in one of the safest cities I could ever think of and recall. But that wasn't my fate. And when I was sent to my residential treatment program, I fell apart. I couldn't keep it together for one day. I would cry, and I had PTSD that was so crippling that I could barely carry out a single conversation. I was mute for weeks, unable to speak, to say anything. And I couldn't, there was no one who would help me because I was just a teenager who was attention-seeking and spoiled and didn't know how to deal with my life. But during those same times, when I was taught I deserved the consequences I get, that this was my fault, I also came to realize that there's no monsters in the closet, no monsters at night, and as bad as the demons that are in my head, nothing is worse than monsters that are in reality. Because all monsters that I would ever name are human, and they have normal names. And I came to fear anyone I came into contact. And I was only able to make one friend because I was crazy. Because who wants to hang out with a person who literally can't talk without crying or screaming or breaking down? So I made a friend. And she was very nice. And she was very weird. And she had very, very serious problems. But she stuck with me, and she wasn't offended, and she didn't think it was all my fault, and that's all that mattered to me. And by the time Halloween rolled around, things were looking up. I wasn't breaking down every day. I could smile for the first time. And I wasn't on constant security, and it was getting to be okay. My medication was sorted out, and as terrible as therapy was, I did have a lot of bright spots. And on the night before Halloween, I was in the same room as my friend because we had just rotated rooms. And this was the first time. And there was another girl in the room, but my friend was very aggressive to her, and I thought she just wanted to talk about a private conversation. And slowly she drew closer, and suddenly it occurred to me that I may have a monster in my room. That was not a good night. I broke down the next day. But I said that it was all okay, that it was my fault, and that she did nothing wrong, because she was my friend. And how could my friend ever hurt me? Because I would never hurt any of my friends. And I needed to have at least one in this terrible place that told me it was all my fault, because I deserved the consequences I get. Because I was the one who ran away. Because I was the one who didn't set off the alarm in a residential treatment program in a room where another girl was. And so I went on, and we stayed friends, and no one said anything, because it was my word against hers, and I made sure my word was very weak, because she was my friend, and I would protect my friend till the day I died. And eventually I graduated, but nothing curbed the fear that anyone could be a monster. Maybe everyone was a monster. Maybe I should fear anyone who walked on the streets, anyone who looked anything, whether they're white or black or Mexican or Muslim, whether they are a girl or a boy or transgender. Anyone was capable of doing horrendous things. And so I began to fear all of them, because my monsters were real, they were in this earth, and it didn't matter whether it was night or day, they were here. And I was convinced they were coming for me. And I went back to my school, and I tried to pretend like things were okay, but slowly I grew angry. And I grew angrier and angrier, and as we read books about rape and suicide, and I heard these opinions that made me want to scream. And slowly I slipped away, slowly I stopped smiling again, slowly I stopped answering questions, up until the point in which a teacher pulled me aside. And she asked me, "Mary, I know things are hard, but it's going to be okay. I need you to tell me what's wrong so I can help you." And at first I refused. But finally, after she badgered me a little bit, I broke down. And I let out all that anger. Because I was angry that in first grade, I was bullied every other day in front of a teacher. And they did nothing about it. I was angry that my friend would be driven to kill herself as an 8-year-old. And I was angry that in 3rd grade, I had friends who were abused and they would never get out of that situation. I was angry because I was elitist and I was a monster for a long time, and I bullied people and I treated people like they were stupid because other people treated me like I was stupid. And I was angry that because all I wanted was for things to change for the better, and I ended up with 5 sexual assault cases over the span of 6 months. And I was angry. And through my tears of rage, as I yelled about things that I couldn't control, I saw my teacher cry. And I stopped. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm angry too. Because this world is unfair. Because you are a good person and you didn't deserve this. And you have a right to be afraid of anyone who walks into your life. But it's going to be okay. Because not all men are monsters. Not all women, or white people, or black people, or Muslims, or Mexicans. Not all of them can be monsters. Because if this world was evil, people like you, or Kira, or Abigail, or Mary Freeman couldn't exist. And that's all I needed to hear. Because for the first time, someone didn't try to tell me, "Oh, it's gonna be okay. Brush it off. It'll get better." Someone told me what I was feeling. Someone felt the pain the fear that I had been suffering through. And that's the only thing that got me through. See, we live in a time of terrorists and kidnappings, shootings and druggies. We live in a time where we fear anyone from Mexicans, Muslims, religions. We fear our economic crashing. We fear war and desolation, depression and failure. We fear all of these things, but we fear it alone, separately yet together. And the only way to truly face these fears, the only way to overcome them, as I show through my story, is it takes another person to say that they're afraid too, instead of everyone trying to pretend that it's okay. It's important to remember that we are all human, and there are some monsters out there, but not all of us can be. And it's important to see our monsters in the right light, to remember that everyone is an individual and are as complex as I am. Because on paper, I look like a pretty good student, who's intelligent, who writes, who researches stem cells as an 8th grader. But in the real world, I'm something that most people would not expect. And we have to remember that there's thousands of me's out there, there's thousands of yous out there, and there's millions, billions of different people. And if we can come together, if we can remember each other's complexity, if we can feel each other's pain and anger and fear, then maybe we can overcome the monsters that we have, whether they be in the dark, whether they be within us, and whether they be